And this hangout is on air. So, John, here we go. John, you're on the line there. 2 minutes past, not too bad. Good evening, everyone. David Salomon here. We are broadcasting from Adelaide, and I'm talking tonight, the second in the series, to John Hartley, Kuku Yalanji man. Country is north of Mossman in far north Queensland. Let's see. Good evening, John. Hello?
Oh, hello.
You're with us there.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us again. Terrific to be continuing your story here.
Well, thank you, David, for the opportunity to share a little of our family story, at least from my perspective. Anyway, ngayo Kuku Yalanji bama, ngayo ko bole garanja, ngayo bondai ganan ba bobo, yala da jawang ngayo ko. What I'm saying here is I'm talking the language from my mother's country. I'm currently sitting on Kaurna country, now known as Adelaide, South Australia. And welcome to all my family, friends and relations.
Thanks, John. And I call out Steve. Hi, Steve, you've joined us online and you can see and hear us, so that's great news. Thanks for bearing with us after our bit of a fumble last week, our first time out. It'll be one of those things that we remember back in the years to come and say, remember that first broadcast. I hope everyone can hear us both. Could you just put a Y in the chat box if you can hear both John and I, please? Steve, you might be able to do that for us. John, I did a little bit of research. We were talking a little bit about Yarrabah at the end of the session last time. And I thought I'd go on to Google and see what they had to say about it. And it's the government site. And I thought it pertinent because it really shows an attitude. This is a current website we're talking about, but talking about the history, and it's referring back to the 1870s, which was the time that your grandmother, I think, was in that area.
Well, my great-grandparents during that time, yeah. My grandmother is 1883. My grandfather, 1887. My grandfather was 1883. But within that 10-year span of the Palmer River Gold Rush, yeah.
Right. So here's what we see on the website there. The Kuku Yalanji people continued to resist the invasion of their lands by the miners, the pastoralists and the timber getters. Frontier violence in the region was a frequent occurrence during the 1870s, resulting in hundreds of casualties. During the 1880s, there was a gradual change in North Queensland in the government policy of taking the country lethal force. Instead, Aboriginal people were removed off their country onto missions, where they would control the settlers, provided a source of labour. This policy change resulted in a decision to establish 2 Aboriginal reserves in the Cooktown, one at Cape Bedford and one at Bloomfield River. So my apologies, that was referring to Woodville, then referred to as Bloomfield in earlier days as well. And this was taken from the new Goldfields, Brisbane Courier, and the year, the year is 1876. So I was wondering, John, whether, what story, so this is very much an invader's view of the world, and I'm wondering, what stories came down through your family. regarding?
Yeah, well, both my great-grandparents endured the brunt of that period of mass murder of Kuku Yalanji. They were among the few lines of family that actually came through that survived. So my grandfather and grandmother have very had, so I'm told by my older brothers, very clear memories and stories from their family of the impact of that of the Palmer River Gold Rush upon well, all people of the Cape York region, but particularly in our instance, the Kuku Yalanji, whether you were Eastern Yalanji or Western Yalanji. So it's had quite an impact.
So are those stories talked about, John? Today?
Yes. Well, they're talked about within our families, certainly. And mainly, I mean, what I'm giving here are very broad brushstrokes.
Yes.
I'm not among family, of course. We're talking about our relationships and our own personal stories, and about the information that was given to us or gathered by us via family. Particularly, about those days and the impact that it has, and the impact it continues still to have on Kuku Yalanji Bama. Yeah, and I was just going to say, I mean, this is a story that goes across the whole of this continent.
Yeah. Well, that's actually the reason I was asking about this, because even today, I was hearing about children being stolen, and so this is 2016 I'm talking about now. Obviously not stolen in the ways that it was happening back then, in terms of a young kid walking along and a trooper coming along on horseback and snatching them, which happens so often. But this idea is still, and it really, I'm really picking up on something that you said about, these policies still reaching into the present. That those colonial papers, they undergo a change of some sort, but they don't ever stop, or they don't ever disappear. Is a continuation of, the paper trail and legislations that continue to oppress Aboriginal people, and those of the institutional racism is sort of as entrenched as ever in some way.
Oh well, I would say, from a Bama perspective, it's very direct ways. If you look at the stolen generations of which the commission was held over, there are more Aboriginal youth, children taken out of their families' care than at any other time in history. So I mean, those kinds of things absolutely continue, and this is the thing about how you massage history. I mean, and who's in control of the narrative.
Well, absolutely. And it was struck me today when I looked at the Yarrabah site, the government site about Yarrabah, and it starts off, when the colonial forces first arrived, and through that whole site, there's no mention of any sort of, there were people who were there, Kuku Yalanji were there, but there's no sense of them having a history or belonging there or having ownership of country. It's just completely white history that is still being told, on those government websites. I was quite surprised that, that them and us was still so total, totally the worldview that's been put across.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that's the work we need to do, is, I mean, from our family's perspective, I mean, we continue to tell the story, now people may choose to listen to that, or they may choose not to. That choice is there, but what is important is that we continue to tell that story, and we continue to work, on behalf and the betterment of our peoples generally.
So, coming to tonight's discussion, we left it with your grandfather sort of feeling the brunt of this policy in Yarrabah, doing his level best, a hard-working man, and really trying to get his wife out of Yarrabah and his child so that they could live together as a family.
Yeah,
It's an astounding situation, really. And, I believe that you have a letter that sort of really brings, very stuff.
Yeah, look, the advocacy of my grandfather was very well known, and from the time he secured his release from the Yarrabah mission, he still advocated for the right to work and make a living where he pleased, the right to take up land and run and manage his own money and affairs, and the right for his children to receive an education. Now that may seem as nothing out of the ordinary today, but Bama Aboriginal people in general had to fight for all those kinds of things. Money was often deposited with the local police officer and doled out occasionally, and sometimes not at all, at the officer's whim. And perhaps the officer may have seen more need for it in his own pocket than giving it to those who had rightly earned it.
Yeah.
But, my grandfather also advocated for the release of his younger brothers who were also in care. He also advocated for the release of my grandmother's younger brother, David Malloy, from Yarrabah into his care, and the right to be treated like any other human being, no better, but certainly no worse. And as you may reflect, this was looked upon quite dimly by the authorities of the day.
Yeah.
And I'll just read you a part of,
if you would,
a part of one letter. I don't know if you can see this clearly, but this is a letter my grandfather wrote to the Chief Protector of Aborigines on May 1st, 1912. And he's got His Honour, the Chief Protector of Aboriginals. Dear Sir, I have the pleasure in writing you these few lines to let you know that I like to get David, brother of my wife Caroline, from the Yarrabah Mission Station. I heard from the boys from the station saying that he would like to come away from the mission station. That's just one of many letters that I have in relation to his advocacy, and I'll give you an example, another paragraph, and this is a reply.
So just on that one, John.
Yep.
So he's wanting to get his wife's brother, was it? Did you say?
Yeah.
At least, presumably, so he could sort of live as a free person and work and maybe help on whether they have holding at that time. I'm not sure. The purpose would have been to be released for work, presumably, to live a family life.
That's right. Well, grandfather and grandmother had established a working farm with friends and relations at a place called Bri, around Mossman area. And it was coming along quite well. And so that's when he started advocating for the release, because he could provide work, he could provide a home, and all those kinds of things for family members.
Then there's a reply that came back. You were going to read it.
Well, it's not a direct reply into that particular letter, but this is the my grandfather had written a letter seeking release from the control orders upon him, my grandmother, his growing family and extended family members. And I'll just read you a little. And this is a tone of letter that was pretty, common during the day. It's written by the Office of the Chief Protectors Aboriginals, Brisbane, 13th December 1914. Sir, this half-caste Edgar Davis is a well-behaved, intelligent man, but he was married to an Aboriginal woman at Yarrabah Mission and is still living with her. His younger brothers are all under the Aboriginal Protection Act, and he habitually associates with them, thus is not legally eligible for exemption.
So they're saying he's not able to have exemption from the Act because he's associating with his wife and family, essentially.
Well, absolutely. I mean,
because they happen to be Aboriginal, well, that makes it impossible for them to be together.
Well, if we, last week I spoke briefly about the protection of Aboriginals and the sale of Opium Act. They make it very clear there that it was about who you could marry, who you could live with, where you could work, how you could work, when you could walk on your own country, when you could have your ceremonies, etc., etc., etc. So in order to obtain an exemption, you had to also give up any contact with your family.
Mm.
Yeah, something that neither my grandmother or grandfather would ever do, and in fact never did do. He was wanting to be released from the Act simply because he had provided a place of employment, a place of living, like any other farmers around that area at the time. Yeah.
So that really does, illustrate the policies, and this is one of the things that I think is really important. We get to know the policies and realise how shocking they are, but then when we realise the ramifications of it, such as we're talking about here now, it actually makes us understand better what was really going on. And from the Palm River Gold Rush, the sort of systematic clearing out of, removal of people from country, as you were saying last time, the explicit disconnection from country and family, so that the miners, the gold miners and the pastoralists and people could come in. This is a sort of a fully orchestrated invasion going on. And, it's the brutality of it, and the only official sort of thing that's come out, I think, really is the Stolen Generations, the report some years back. It leaves so much of the story untold. And here we are, you know, talking about constitutional recognition, and it's like, you know, we haven't even scratched the surface yet on what actually the lack of recognition and the fullness of the, you know, implications of that. We haven't had a proper discussion until, well, it's starting a little bit now in the social media, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, I mean, perhaps this is a conversation we can have perhaps in our last broadcast in this series, you know. There's a long way to go, I think. Yeah. And can I just say hello to Timothy, TG student, New South Wales,
yeah.
and to Steve out there.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Can you? I know you've got some notes there, sort of, you know, directed away from some of those things that you wanted to say today. So, we're going to hear more about your grandfather. Were there other things that you wanted to say about his challenges and so on?
Not so much. Look, as I said again, I'm giving very broad brushstrokes, and in no way it's sort of really indicative of the harshness and the struggles that both my grandparents and family, and in fact all Yalanji Bama were up against during that time. You know, I think to really get into that sort of thing, it takes a lot more time than you know, a 30-minute interview, and to get into it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give people at least some kind of insight into what that struggles and the hardships were about, you know. And we see, you know, from the time my grandfather was released and with his family, and they established themselves at Bri, and the birth of their other, well, the twins, my Uncle Charlie and Auntie Myra, the establishment of a working farm. You know, aside from vegetables, it was, I think at the time, was sugarcane.
Yeah. Pineapple, maybe they hadn't come in yet.
No, that hadn't come into it yet until they reached the Mossman. But cyclones was to put an end to that crop and force them into a bit more financial hardship, and they ended up renting a house in Mossman Town. You know, from where my mother's 10 siblings, elder siblings, by that time had been born and were living with the grandparents or around my grandparents at that time. You know, my grandfather was very well known for his planting of foods, you know, everywhere he went. Even in back in Yarrabah, as you're driving it down into Yarrabah, you come down a windy sort of a slope hill. To the right there, I remember driving down there with one of my older brothers from my mother's older sister, Auntie Gladdy, pointing out that particular area is called Edgar's Farm, and that's where he journeyed every day up this hill to, you know, with hoe in hand to till the soil and grow vegetables that people would have fresh vegetables and may to eat, and that was something he done wherever he went, not only for his own family, but for Bama that were passing by or coming through or were looking for some food.
So were they subsistence farming there, or were they supplying local shops, or, you know, were they just growing for their own family community, or was it actually going out to
I'm sorry,
from the farm?
From the farm. Well, they were at that time. They were trying to make a working farm. To make
Working farm. Yeah.
a financially viable farm. Yeah. To so they could look after family and secure the releases of family members and so on.
And that eventually did happen, did it? Was the family united on the farm there, or?
Yeah. Well, there were points where they were together, but of course they were subject to a lot of harassment from law enforcement, etc., etc. My grandmother's younger brother, David Malloy, actually only was released from Yarrabah because he had joined the Light Horsemen.
Yes.
In the First World War. He did end up coming back to family after the war, but suffered from having been exposed to mustard gas.
Right.
And unfortunately, he went for a walk up into the gorge, deep into the gorge, up into the bluff country, and took his own life there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Aboriginal ex-service persons did the very same thing.
Mm.
I know my cousin brother also after coming back from Vietnam some years later done the same thing, and he never got out of the fact that they were just people like them who were trying to look after their family and make a living in their own country.
Yeah. Mm.
But it was from Mossman. I think my mother was around 10 or 11 years of age that the family then moved deep into the Mossman Gorge, and my grandfather, having secured a 99-year lease on which is ironic, now leasing your own country. Or portions of your own country, back again.
And was that settlement there in the gorge at that time, or did he establish that?
Well, there were a few bummer there. They were still living in old humpies, at that time. And my grandfather helped establish that mission there. He planted a lot of the foods around there because he could see in the future if people were hungry that they would need, their hands on ready foods. He assisted in building some buildings there along with other elders. He also built the first thatch roof church there.
Right.
And my grandfather went through somewhat of a religious turn, I guess. That's not the right word, but he became very involved and actually began preaching and built the first thatch roof church. In fact, built the first church deep into the Mossman Gorge up there. And was quite instrumental in ensuring Bummer had a place to stay, had food. And that was before what was called the Gorge Mission was established officially. It was some time later that they actually established the Gorge Mission.
So is there a legacy today that reaches back to the work that he did at those times, John?
Well, of course, the family, it's very clear in our thoughts, what grandfather done. Also, people of, I guess, my generation know very well my grandparents and grandmother, their role in that place up there. My grandmother's special relationship with that country up there, and my grandfather's special relationship to that country up there, is known by, I guess my generation, but of course, younger generations, they may do, but many, that story is lost through the generation. If we don't, if we don't keep telling the story, they say that
Yeah.
it only takes a generation to lose it.
That's right. That's right.
And,
It only needs to be broken once, and it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's important that we continue. But the Davis family was very well known throughout far north Queensland. Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
So,
during the days,
Steve and Lizzie have joined us here too, John.
Hello, Steve and Felicity. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Long time no see. So my mother and family began living in, it was, well, I'll leave this for next week, where my contact first happened with my grandparents. But
Okay,
they
we're about to, sorry, John.
So they secured, resecured their land in the form of a 99-year lease opposite, in the light of a mountain that we call Manjal Dimbi, which is a very sacred for Kuku Yalanji people. It has and my family have very deep connections to that story place. And of course, having cleared some of the land, my grandfather, planted foods, and there was taro, sweet potato, sour sop, sweet lemons, sour lemons, mango, custard apple, guava, all these kinds of foods. And the local bummer, our family, in fact, on the mission. So we had all family on the mission here, and our family line was here next to it. They would come down and partake of some of the vegetables, but they would also, after they'd been hunting or fishing, they would also come back with some fish for the grandparents, or some wild bush food, and they would exchange goods, keeping like a balance, giving and receiving, which that's the real and first economy of this country, was about giving and receiving and maintaining that relationship balance, And so I don't know of any line of the Davis family that has not swum, and I'm sure there are. I still have grandchildren that haven't been there, but that have swum in that Mossman Gorge, and that was always been known as the Davis family swimming hole. But all our generations of Davis family have been to that gorge, have swum in that gorge. All my family have. I've still yet to take a few of my grandchildren, but I hope to do that in the not too distant future. And once you dive into that gorge, you never forget it. It always calls you back, to that or to our bubu, our country. Yeah.
The story associated with that gorge, John?
Sorry?
What's the story? The story associated, the dream story.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's quite a big story of Gubidi, and Gubidi was like a lawman that came to that country and showed the people the foods to eat, where they could go, where not to go, foods not to eat, how to turn poisonous foods into edible foods, and all those kinds of things. So Gubidi came to share the law of how to live in that country, and the relationship to that country. And it's just briefly, but it's quite a big story. It's a story I think maybe for the last episode we could go into that, because I hope to talk about our relationship to country and its meaning and things like that.
So, well, John, our time is running short. So, just very briefly, next week you're starting a new chapter. Can you just tell us in a sentence or two what we about?
Well, I think, hopefully I've done a little bit to establish my grandfather and grandmother's, share a little bit of their story, of where they come from and some of the things they encountered. Not nearly, I don't think, do I do them justice in the little bit I've shared. But next week, I'd like to perhaps then start into my mother's story and my father's story, how they met, how I came to be where we lived, I guess. So next week is about where the fresh water meets the salt water. My mother being a freshwater woman, never out of the gorge, and my father being a seaman for many years. Yeah.
Well, thanks, John. So there you are, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's a great privilege to be here and making these stories available online so that anyone can join in and listen. If you have any questions, now's the time to put them before we close for this week. And we'd love to see you again next week. And if you look to the page, or if you've registered today, you'll also get a notice for that coming on. But I can tell you now, it'll be Sunday at 7, and we'll continue John's story, his mother and father's meeting, and we're gradually moving towards now. Week. Thanks again, yes. I'm checking now. Max from Lismore. I'll just let you reply to that, John. I haven't read just yet, but Max has just come in. He says, from Lismore, feel so privileged to be able to hear some of your story and family this week. I remember visiting Moss Gorge very clearly. It brings so much of the meaning to it, a very special place. That's right. Absolutely right, Max. I've been up with John a couple of times to the gorge, and there's other brothers and cousins there. It is a bit of magic country, no doubt about that. So thanks, Max.
Yeah, thank you, Max, and thank you, Timothy. And please, if you have the time, please join us again next week.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're looking forward to seeing you next week then. All the best.